Hello and welcome to the Pythian podcast, the podcast where on occasion we make and upload episodes. This episode is a little bit later than normal due to life, and for the past week we've been trying to upload but have been unable to do so because we recorded it incorrectly. So sorry about that. My name is Casey Pemberton, and I'm the Chancellor Commander of Castilian Lodge number 39. And my co-host is Dylan Callahan, who is the prelate of Castilian Lodge number 39 and the secretary of Damascus Lodge number
445.
445?
445.
445, the first lodge in Kansas in quite some time. All right, Brother Dylan, do you want to talk about what we'll be talking about today?
I'll talk about what we'll be talking about, and that is benevolence, the third part of our three-part series on friendship, charity, and benevolence. Or I guess maybe I should say charity, friendship, and benevolence, because that's the order we chose to do it in for some reason. But yes, we'll be talking about the Pythian concept of benevolence today. Should we go ahead and get right into it, Casey?
Well, I don't know of any big news other than Damascus Lodge is fully formed now.
That's right. We are fully formed, and we had our first regular meeting on Friday the 13th, and it was a very lucky day for us. We got a lot done, got our bylaws passed, got a new member initiated. Well, not initiated, but the application passed, and lots of other stuff. It was a really good meeting, and we had, actually, I do want to mention something else that happened after the meeting. One of our members, Genaro Guerrero, had a fantastic idea to have one of our first opening benevolences of our lodge, benevolent actions, be to raise money for a nice Thanksgiving for the local men's shelter. And so over the course of, I think it was about half an hour, we raised $120 from among the membership. And so we're going to be putting that and more towards making sure that the good folks at the Emporia Men's Shelter here in Emporia, Kansas, will be able to have a nice Thanksgiving.
That sounds great. It's awesome to see our membership get together and be willing to support great causes and helping out the communities in which they reside. So, benevolence.
Benevolence.
What is the Pythian concept of benevolence, Dylan?
Well, once again, I think we're going to have to turn to our poet laureate, if you will, Reverend L.V. Price of Somerville, Massachusetts, who wrote, I believe it was an address, so it was a speech to a gathering of knights and their families in Somerville, Massachusetts in 1885. And in that, he laid out the three cardinal principles, friendship, charity, and benevolence, of Pythian knighthood. So let me just go ahead and quote what he has to say, and then we can pick it apart. He says, benevolence. What is benevolence as a working virtue of Pythian knighthood? Is it not another name for charity? Actually, I read that wrong, but it is not another name for charity any more than charity is another name for friendship. It is something different from either, though partaking of the nature of both. Benevolence is friendship and charity incarnating themselves in deeds. It is a virtue linking heart and head together in efforts for another's good. It is not, therefore, a calculating investment of time, energy, or money with expectation of profit, but disinterested, spontaneous, good doing. And that is something that I think needs to be pointed out, that it distinguishes itself, not as a mere cover-all for friendship and charity being benevolence, but no, it is its own concept within Pythianism. What do you think about that?
So our founding virtues are not benevolence, benevolence, and benevolence?
Right. Yes, very well put. Yes, yes.
Well, this completely throws out my worldview. I mean, I thought we were just here to get together and give people money.
Apparently not, and we're also apparently not just here to just be friends and hang out and do funsy things, and we're not just here to soak ourselves in esotericism and thinking higher thoughts, because it's sort of like what James talks about in the Bible when he says faith without works is dead. You need those works to show what's already in your mind and in your heart. And I think that's what benevolence is. It's the friendship and charity in action.
I read this in the one that we were unable to upload, and I think it applies still here. Unfortunately, I can't find one about Pythian rings, but I think the idea is the same. It's a poem, author is unknown, called the Masonic, those men who wear those Mason's rings. Those men who help my dad each day, they wear those Mason's rings, a square and compass set in gold, of the praise of which I sing. My dad, he hurt his back, one cold and wintry day. He slipped and fell upon the ice. The insurance would not pay. And since that time, those rings I see, one hands that helps us much. With mowing lawns and hauling trash, each day my heart they touch. They even built a house for me amid our backyard trees, where all the neighborhood kids would come and play, laughter full of glee. My mother, she cried from happiness the time the Masons came to aid our family in distress, without a thought of gain. And when I'm big, just like my dad, of this I must be told. It must be told that I want to wear a Mason's ring, a square and compass gold. Long years have passed since when my dad was in that plaster cast, and since I swore that solemn oath which unites us to the last. But more than that, I'm proud to say I wear his Mason ring. One dad wore for many years, until his death this spring. And on the one last time his comrades came to aid my weeping mother, they praised and bid a fond farewell to our fallen brother. And after which my son did ask about their aprons white, and of the rings upon their hands of gold so shiny bright. With tearful eyes I said with pride, they're men of spirit pure, those men who wear those Mason rings, of that you can be sure. And before he went to bed that night, the family he foretold, someday I'll wear a ring like Dad's, a square and compass gold. I wish I could find one that was Pythian related, but I think the idea is the same. Benevolence, I would argue it's almost the most important. So they're all equal of importance, although I would probably rank charity at the top. But benevolence is very close to that because it is the virtue that those outside of the order see.
I can't disagree with that. I really must agree. And when you say which one is the most important or how you would rank them, I think the best point to be made is that you really can't rank them in order of importance because they are equally important. You can't have one without the other two. If you don't understand, and I think it's even said in this speech, if you don't understand friendship as a page, you won't understand charity as an esquire. And if you don't understand friendship and charity as a page and esquire, then you certainly won't understand benevolence as a knight. And we may have other organizations' concepts of friendship, of charity, of benevolence, and whatever else other organizations teach, but Pythianism teaches their own distinctive definitions, and not distinctive as in they've changed the meaning of the words, but there's a new meaning, there's a deeper meaning, or perhaps a more personal and universally felt within the order meaning behind friendship, behind charity, and behind benevolence.
It makes a unique call upon your heart.
Yeah.
As opposed to all other orders. we talked about this when we were on the historical light episode. And it goes to friendship for me first and foremost, because Masonry really does, to just show a distinction, Masonry is really, really big for self-improvement. But Pythianism complements that by saying, yes, you need to improve, but that includes you need to improve in friendship. And as a part of your own improvement, you need to improve others. You need to help others with their improvement. And I think that's huge, because unlike other groups, which I think kind of reflect that of Masonry, where they're about self-improvement, Pythianism really holds to, well, as a part of improving the self, you need to help improve others.
Right. I think that's really where the focus is within Pythianism, the betterment of mankind.
And like I said, I think benevolence, its huge role in that is not only being kind and helping others, but equally, and if not more important, equally important, it shows to the outside world what we are as Pythians.
Yes.
It shows why we're different. And for, like the poem talks about for Masonry, for a child or the wife of a member, or even the grandson of a member, it's what they're going to see. That's what the outside world sees. And them seeing, well, why do those people show up every day to help that family? What is it about them? What is it about that group that makes them want to help them so much?
Yeah.
Well, they're all Pythians. And I think that's a huge deal. And the whole world has a claim upon those kindnesses. We don't just reserve that for fellow Pythians. You guys donated to the local men's shelter for them to have a good Thanksgiving dinner. We know multiple members in our lodge who they will go work with the homeless day in and day out. And a part of why they do that, and a part of why they outreach to the lodge to help, is that understanding of benevolence within the lodge.
Yeah, and I think my final thoughts on it are, I have a couple of things. You mentioned before inside and outside the lodge. I think inside the lodge, the benevolence that you mostly see is that, personally, as someone who hasn't been in the order nearly as long, scarcely a fraction as long as most of the other people in, let's say, Sicilian Lodge. As somebody who's a newbie, really, I've really seen a lot of benevolence bestowed on the younger members by the older members. And that's something that's very striking when you see that the older members are so, I mean, technically it's a disinterested benevolence, but their interest is in seeing the younger members succeed. They want to see the young men coming in reaping the benefits of the organization that they've been in for 50 plus years, and I think that comes from a good heart. And it's not just training. There is some, you can see the Pythianism has obviously worn off on them, but the people that come to the Knights of Pythias and stick around, they're the people that have really good hearts. And another example of benevolence, like we were just talking about, the outside benevolence. When it's on the inside, it's, you're my brother, I want to see you succeed. But really what fraternalism teaches, just as a logical conclusion, is the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Mankind, we're, at least in a sense, we're all brothers. We all trace back, we all come from the same people. Within fraternalism, it's just simply a logical conclusion that social barriers and political barriers and religious barriers, they just start breaking down like dominoes. Once you start really looking into it, believing it, and feeling what the ritual and the teachings and the atmosphere really inculcate. And that is, we're not going to allow artificial and superficial differences and constructs come between us and the betterment of our communities, our neighbors, whether they're next door neighbors or in neighboring states. You start to have a feeling of the universality of the human family. And I think that's something that you're not just going to find in the Knights of Pythias, of course not. You'll find that in other fraternal groups. You'll find that in the church, hopefully, because it's supposed to be there. And I know it is there. But the Knights of Pythias, they definitely put their own flavoring on it. They put their own particular thoughts and shared experiences behind it. And that's something that I really appreciate about our order.
Agreed. My final thoughts, I have to go back to the Reverend again. Talking about what benevolence is, and his explanation is that it orders us to watch by the cradle of the orphan and shield the fatherless from the evils and ills of an unfriendly world. It summons us to the place where sorrow appears or the blow of misfortune has fallen, to console the grief or bind up the wound. This is the kind of personal benevolence enjoined upon every knight of our order. In the most solemn and impressive manner, personal good-doing, quality, and alone independent of all injunctions or committees, is the very life of his friendship and charity. These virtues struggling into good deeds as naturally and necessarily as the life in the plant struggles into the flower and fruit. And there's one more where he mentions, and I think it's very important. Here it is. He talks about benevolence being unobtrusive. And I think that's important to note that, the benevolence we show isn't to be in any way obtrusive or intrusive. We're not meant to force benevolence on anyone. If they don't want our help, if they don't want us, if someone doesn't want help or aid for their sorrows or anything, we should recognize that while we do feel and want to help them and aid them and make them feel better, it's not our job to force ourselves into that situation. It's our job to be there when the brother or his widow or his family wants to reach out to us and ask for that help. So those are my ending thoughts. I know the thing I did want to mention that we had talked about before was, we've seen a lot of great examples of it in our lodge. We have a brother who is in a assisted living home, and a simple benevolence was a lot of members. I didn't, and I feel a little bad about it now that we haven't gotten to see him in a long time. Showed up and went to his birthday.
Yeah.
Like I said, I kind of wish I had gone. Now that if I'd have known we wouldn't get to see him in many, many months after that. But those things are, it's just the little things like that we often don't even think about as being benevolence.
And
that
you
I
said a
think makes all
mouthful
the
there
difference.
in as much as that you regret not going now, because it's not like you didn't want to go. Obviously, we've got, and I remember at the time I had work that day and all of that. But when you're in that lodge environment that inculcates that emotion behind the benevolence, it makes you want to do it. It's not a chore. You want to do it.
Agreed. And I think that goes back to charity and friendship being at the root of benevolence. If you don't have that disinterested friendship, you won't have the desire to be benevolent, and it will just feel like a chore.
Amen.
That's all I've got.
That's all I've got.
Well, this has been the Pythian podcast, and I forgot to put this disclaimer at the beginning, but just know that all of the opinions here are the opinions solely of the participants and do not represent any lodges or grand lodges, and especially not the Supreme Lodge's opinions.
Especially not them.
We don't want to be misconstrued as speaking for any of those groups. We're not. We're just a couple of fairly active members who like to get together and talk on occasion. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye.
Goodbye.